Welcome to Creating a Bloom Effect. What we're going to look at today is how we can create a nice glowing, blurred, bloomy effect for an image. So to get started, let's double click on our network editor and add a movie file in top. Let's switch this file parameter out and let us select our Trillium flower. What we want to do is we want to accentuate the highlights, the brighter parts of our image to give it that glowing ethereal effect. So what we're going to do is we are going to right click on the connector for our movie file in, and let's navigate to the threshold. The threshold is used to be able to threshold out pixels depending on whether they are above or below our threshold. So here we have it set 2.5. If we decreased our threshold, we would fill up this area and creating a mask effect. But what we want to do is let's set our threshold to 0.6 because we want to focus on specifically these nice highlight elements and these brighter parts of our image. Next up, we are going to right click on our threshold and add a composite top. We are going to bring our original movie file ins connector into the composite top. And now we see that we have a composite of the threshold and the movie file in using the multiply operation. Awesome. An important part of getting a nice bloom effect is adding a blur or having some blur in our image. Now, as the top operator's name describes, this helps us blur our image a bit. But what we want to do is we want to make sure we increase our pre-shrink by 3. So pre-shrink is a parameter that reduces the image's resolution before applying the blur, and that is really helpful for optimization. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to increase our filter size. I'm going to bump that up all the way to 20. And that is the amount of blur in the pixels. So I want it to be nice and glowy and blurred out. A helpful trick to know is that sometimes you may see artifacting and banding in your blur, especially with gradients. And so a common technique is to navigate to the comment page, go to our pixel format parameter here at the bottom, and we are going to set that to a 16-bit flow. That'll just ensure that we don't have any gradients and that we have a nice smooth blur or a banding in our gradients, sorry. The next thing we're going to do is add a luma level. The luma level is going to allow us to increase the brighter parts of our image. So I know I want to increase the brightness of my image to 1.5. I really want to give a nice glowing effect. And the last thing we want to do here is we want to composite it all together. So I'm going to place a composite in my network editor, drag my original movie file in, and then drag my luma level wire into the composite. We can see that it is indeed being composited, but we don't see anything, and that's because the default operation here is multiply. We want to change that out and choose screen. Now we can see we have this really lovely ethereal glowing effect. You can also adjust some of these parameters if you feel like the blur is maybe too little or you want to increase it even more. Feel free to do that. So now that we have this nice effect, how can we reuse it across our networks? How can we make sure that we have this bloom effect that is reusable? Well, what we can do is on our composite top, let's go ahead and right click and add a null top. Over here, our null top to create an instance just of this image. We're going to scooch this null top over to the right, and we're going to move our movie file in over to the left. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to click on our threshold, and then we are going to box select by clicking shift and make sure we select out this middle part here. This middle part is essentially where our effect is being created. Next up, we're going to right click on our network and navigate to the collapse selected item here on this dialog. And boom, everything now lives inside of this base. This base now has our bloom effect. So for example, if we wanted to pull this into our network, we could just copy and paste it. I'm going to make sure I disconnect that from the original movie file in. And inside of it, it has my effect. You'll notice here immediately that there's nothing showing up, and that's because it's searching for something to come into it. So what we can do is let's drop another movie file into our network. We can add our banana, kind of make sure we connect it into the base that we just created. And let's change this image to the Metler 1. Let's create a nice ethereal effect here. So we're going to right click on the output connector here of our base, and let's select a null. And then right away we can see that that nice glowing effect is being applied to our image. In future videos, we'll look at how we can add custom parameters to the top of our base so that we can control it from the outside.